Welcome to Integrated. This is the podcast where we seek to bridge the gap between the intellect and the will so that we can grow as disciples of Christ, surrendering all that we are and all that we have to the truth. Hey guys, welcome back to Integrated. My name is Angela Erickson, and today I'm doing an episode all about home birth. And this is probably going to be a part 1 of 2. I'm not sure when we'll record the second. There were just so many things that we didn't get into today that I wanted to, but for today's interview, I interviewed birth worker Katie McCormick. She lives in Ireland at this time with her husband and family. We wanted to sit down. She messaged me on Instagram and then sent me an email asking to come on to talk about natural birth and what it's like to give birth without intervention and allowing and trusting God in this process and trusting his design for our physiology. We wanted to talk more about the Holy Trinity and reflecting Marian principles, but we ended up spending a lot of time talking about natural physiological birth as well as some of the history behind birth in terms of medicalized birth and how this ties in a little bit to her reversion back into the church because it's all interconnected for her. She does talk a little bit about that. We don't spend as much time on that as I would have liked to, but it was a really interesting conversation. And I think it's really important for both men and women to sort of hear some of these things because I think if anything, the last couple of years have sort of made us question a little bit more of what we understood to be normal, quote unquote, in the health field and deferring our intuition to the quote unquote experts and allowing other professionals to dictate to us how we should be doing things when it comes to our health. And so I want to challenge that narrative a little bit. You guys know I've done podcast episodes on my own home birth and what that was like for me. And again, there are a lot of caveats here, of course. Like we're not saying if there's a medical indication that you need a hospital birth for whatever reason, of course, we would both agree that that's a better option. You need to birth where you feel the safest. But there are a lot of factors involved for what actually makes a woman feel the safest and activate that parasympathetic nervous response, things that help facilitate labor, all of that stuff. So we talk about it here in this podcast episode today on Integrated. A huge thank you to all of my Patreon supporters and those of you who have sent in one-time gifts. You are amazing. And for those of you interested in looking for ways to support my work, you can check the description below. And that includes some coupon codes, discount codes for a couple of my favorite shops, namely Star of the Sea Gifts and Our Lady's Closet. Again, thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to send me an email at angela@integratedangela.com. I love to hear from you guys. So I hope that you enjoy this episode and let me know if you learn anything or if you've experienced home birth and what that was like for you. So I'd love to hear from you guys. And until next time. Thank you, Katie, for joining me on Integrated today. Would you mind telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited to be talking to you today. Well, I've been living in Ireland since 2016, but I was born in America and grew up mostly in Redmond, Washington, where I am now visiting my parents. So we've been in Ireland the last 7 years. I have 3 children and I'm expecting my 4th. And I really got into the birth world naturally through having my first baby was a home birth. All my babies have been born at home in Ireland, very rurally, in a lot of ways in an older traditional setting like it used to be. And I chose that deliberately, which we'll talk about. But as so many women say, it cracked me wide open after that first home birth and flooded me with a new understanding and a new passion for coming into the birth world and seeking out more knowledge and why it's been so medicalized, sometimes unnecessarily, and wanting to be there for women and educate myself and support women to seek out natural birth if that's what they want, a family birth in their home, supported with their kids if they would like them there, their other children, and supported by their local community, and just have that experience into motherhood, a somewhat more gentle journey into motherhood, and really realizing their natural God-given abilities with motherhood. So that's how I got very passionate in that. But I have a background in holistic health and massage therapy and herbalism and things like that. But that's not how I started. I was actually accounting and finance, and I got my master's at Notre Dame for accountancy in 2010, and had a career in that for 6 years, working for a big public accounting firm. That's how I met my husband. But my soul was not in that. It was very, very hard few years. But I have that corporate life background. And then when I became a mother, I was like, this is it for me. I had a major, realization. That's what I want to do, be at home with my kids.
So yeah, I think a lot of us have that experience, right? I mean, we sort of, I've told people before, I didn't really think about motherhood that much growing up. I figured I'd become a mother, but I didn't like envision what that would look like. I sort of thought I would be a working mom and I would be working a corporate job and hopefully traveling the world and doing all the millennial things that I thought meant meeting my potential. And then I became a mom. And nope, I was more than happy to forsake all of that so I could be home with my children, because you do sort of realize, I think when you start to get into touch with the person that God created you to be, you just see where your vocation is, and you see the fruit that is being born at home when you are home, and you want to cultivate that more. So when you were talking about your background, you started off with home birth, which I feel like today, I mean, it's becoming somewhat more common, but it was not common, 10 years ago or so. How did you like decide right away that you knew you wanted to do that when you got pregnant the first time? Did you know right away you wanted to have a home birth, or was it sort of the more research you did about the medicalization of birth, did that sort of persuade you in the direction of having your children at home?
Yes, a little of both. You're right. Most women, almost all women that I've worked with, had a relationship with in the birth world, have sadly a hospital experience that wasn't very wonderful, and then choose home birth. It's a little bit of both, because there's this part of me since I was a little girl that just has been really fascinated with like the pioneer times and birth. I used to watch the TLC birth videos, which were usually hospital births when I was a kid. But I babysat for this woman when I was about 15 years old, and I probably shouldn't have been looking, but she had one of these photo albums in her living room, and it happened to be her water birth, home birth, and it was quite graphic. And I remember being like, I shouldn't be looking at this, but I was truly, it wasn't looking at it in a sexual way. I was just fascinated in, oh my gosh, it was so raw and real and incredible. And I really loved this mom that I babysat for. She had this gentle, sweet nature to her. So that image stuck with me, and I think I just pushed it down and carried it with me. And then when I became a mom at 30, that popped in my head, and I remember Googling water birth, and it just went on from there. And I got loads of books at the little local library in Ireland. I remember they thought it was loony because I just kept coming in asking for these authors, and they're like, never heard of it, but they got them in for me. And I read probably 6 or 7 books, not that you need to, but that was my journey. And it was like, I have to do this, and this is going to be a rite of passage. I need to do this way, and I know it might be hard. And it did just kind of come naturally. And my husband, thank God, he just followed my confidence in that, really. He read a little bit, but he was like, yeah, okay, but I had still some hospitalization with that first birth, in not the birth, but the pregnancy. Like I did the ultrasounds and all those things. And then I've slowly kind of backed off that. But anyway, yeah, it's kind of funny. I just felt very confident in it, a little bit naively, to be really honest with you.
Well, it's your first. Well. Yeah. I remember my first baby. We had hospital births with our first 4. I did a podcast episode on that quite a while ago now. So for any of our listeners that maybe haven't heard my birth story, I did give part of my birth story, most of it. Of course, sometimes there are just details you don't necessarily want to share. But I remember having my first in the hospital, and I didn't even bother going to any birthing classes. I didn't practice breathing. I didn't do any of that. I'm not really sure why. Part of it was because I was working so much and traveling on the road a lot. And so part of it was a time issue, but I didn't do any research like at all. I just sort of went to my prenatal appointments and expected that was giving me the education I needed to sort of prepare for birth, even if I didn't do any Bradley courses or anything like that. And it wasn't until I had decided on a home birth that I started reading about it and watching videos of other moms having home births. And my goodness, it is so powerful. Like it actually makes me so sad. When I think about it, because I at the time I was preparing for a home birth, I'd had 4 children already. And I had never seen what birth looked like. I had done it 4 times and I had not seen what birth looked like.
Okay.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. No,
And
I'm so glad you said that, because that really is the truth for so many women. And like, yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, so to watch other women give birth and realize like this is a part of our this lost maternal wisdom that we would normally be raised around, traditionally women would be attending other women at their births. You're learning how to do all this stuff. You're seeing it. Your children are probably going to see it, that kind of thing. And realizing this is really powerful to witness. It's one thing to do it, and it's another thing to observe and witness the miracle of life. And the way I'm going to get emotional talking about it. It is just so beautiful and sacred. It's amazing. And so after my own home birth, it was like, I'm sold for life. This is it. Like this is to me being in touch with God's beautiful design and embodying. I'm not going to say, I feel like we have to say all the caveats. Yes, sometimes a medicalized birth is necessary. Yes, hospitals have their place. Yes, sometimes interventions are necessary. However, it's not probably as often as you think. So would you maybe talk about that? Like, can you talk a little bit about the history of medicalized birth and the cascade of interventions? Because I don't think women understand the risk that they are taking, perhaps going and having a medicalized birth at a hospital.
Yes. You've opened the box here.
I have, because people talk about the risk of home birth all the time, but they don't talk about the risks of hospital birth, which are many. There's a reason why the U.S. has the highest maternal mortality rates in the world.
Yes. Statistically, people like statistics. I do. Statistically, home birth truly is safer for mother and child. And it's proven to be that way. Why there were deaths, I have so many things to say. Where do I begin? Why there were deaths, we think often before medicalization of birth, before, I always have a hard time saying that word, obstetrics was a major degree that men were, only men could get at the time, at the beginning of it all.
Which had its own issues, which we can get into their understanding of physiology and things like that.
Oh, totally. Like, for example, they were like working with cadavers, even in birth. But am I saying that right? Cadavers? Yes. Dead bodies are complete, like plastic bodies when it came to birth. So many things. But anyway, women always, from the beginning of time, right, were having their babies probably with another woman, with their mother, their grandmother, all sorts of cultures, right? That is the way it was. You made your babies at home, you had your babies at home. And when you come across life itself, this is how all life comes to this world. And God gave women this ability to give birth, to receive birth, as I like to say. That is going to come with the other side of the coin, which is death. You cannot separate those two. That doesn't mean that we just, go have our babies without any kind of reverence for that seriousness, or, if something did seem off, we didn't go seek medical attention. But most of the time, women feel that the hospital will completely erase that possibility of death. But handling any form of, life, sacred life, especially newborn life that completely needs their mother, you are holding that fragility that we are mortal. So it's kind of just taking that. I like to start there always, because everything's so sanitized now, and like you said, you didn't even know really what natural birth looked like, because it's almost not allowed to a degree in the hospital. There are certain circumstances and they try to make it natural and stuff, but and that's great, but for the most part it's not being experienced, because there's so much fear in that place of, well, let's make sure none of these things happen. But okay, when you are in that process of let's make sure A, B, C, D, E, F, G doesn't happen, you are intervening with actually out of risk being there in the first place most of the time.
Yep. So you're
And
worrying for no
creating risk.
reason. Yes, and you're making the mom worry and prolonging labor because it's anxiety
Tension.
inducing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tension is the number one cause of complications. Tension, the cervix will not open with tension. We do not feel safe. Our cervix will not open. And it's the truth that, and I know this is kind of, I don't love this phrase, but like, what puts the baby in brings the baby out, meaning that relaxation that you feel, hopefully in the intimacy and covenant of marriage, but like you feel in that moment that you made the baby. And I know that's not always the situation for every woman, but still, think of the ideal situation of making a baby with your husband and the relaxation you feel and the love and the,
the oxytocin. Like, let's talk about the
Yes.
oxytocin, because that's the bonding hormone, and that is what you experience a flood of after you've made the baby. And in that process, even the dimmed lights. That's one thing too. Is like people don't understand your environment. Those dimmed lights in restaurants, dim the lights in the evening, and it actually boosts oxytocin in the brain to make a more romantic environment. And that's why women tend to go into labor in the evening, because the lights are dimmer. You're releasing more oxytocin, and
you're relaxing. You're preparing for sleep. All those things you change, right?
All of those things, and that's what initiates those contractions too. You need oxytocin. That's why they use pitocin to artificially start contractions, which has its own drawbacks. But you have oxytocin also working to start those contractions. So the more oxytocin, the better.
Oh, and I mean, first of all, pitocin blocks natural oxytocin.
Yes, so it does.
It's
blocking your bonding.
I am really against induction. I'm going to put that out there. If it is a true emergency, you would roll that woman into surgery. Yeah. That just tells you it's not. It's an artificial way to speed it up, and almost always causes a C-section or more complications, baby's heart. It's this, as I like to say, that it kind of false gateway, the gateway drug. The induction is the gateway to a snowball of all these things. And it's truly this false thing that has never helped women. It's made, contractions are then back to back. You don't get a break. The baby's super stressed out because it's like there's no flood of oxytocin. The cervix is like usually more tense. Anyway, so oxytocin is the love hormone that God gave us that makes everything happen, creates babies, helps us bond with our babies, opens our cervix, helps us relax, initiates the contractions, and goes on and on after birth, helps the placenta come out, brings your milk in. All of that is initiated by your environment. So the main three things are that the lighting is huge. Not being observed is huge. When you are having an intimate moment in your marriage, for example? Do you want people that you've never seen before standing there?
Yeah.
You would not relax, right? That's not how it's supposed to be. I like to say that's truly the same for birth. And I know that's a hard, but of course, sometimes the odd time you need a doctor or whatever. But for the most part, it is so intimate, and your body is craving that intimacy, modesty, privacy. And that's what's going to really open you up. And that is the same for every woman. Even in home births, I think a lot of women make the mistake of inviting like 10 people because they're so excited, and they want a photographer and all this stuff. And it usually a lot of times could disturb them and sabotage them, and they end up hiding in the bathroom because you can't circumvent those natural hormones that are like demanding you to have privacy and dim lighting and quiet. So yeah, I think the medicalization, back to that first question, it came in because of a lot of things happening at the time, right? Like the midwives were being attacked as witches.
She's a witch. Sorry.
I still don't know.
Weighing ducks and
I do think witches like existed, or that
for
stuff,
sure.
dark stuff. But a lot of times, I really believe the midwives in the past were truly just women in the neighborhood that had a keen interest in it and attended births and were kind of these grandmother women. And they also knew a lot about plants and herbs to help in childbirth. And that was it. I don't think there was a lot of witchcraft happening. Anyway, but that came in, and then they realized, oh, we can give men these medical degrees and essentially outlaw these non-medical women with no certifications, no degrees, from being the birth people. And it was all about money, very much about money, like most things, because now they have this degree and birth started to cost money, right? And these medical advances. Another big thing, especially in England and Ireland, is that Queen Elizabeth was one of the first people to get an epidural, a person that people were watching. And oh my gosh, she had this painless epidural birth, we're numbed out. And, naturally, that spread.
It sounds appealing, right?
It became something that you wanted to achieve, to have the money to get the epidural and to have that experience. And it just snowballed from there, really.
Would you mind talking a little bit about, for example, how doctors, first of all, OB-GYNs are surgeons by trade. So there is sort of that background to induce labor or have a cesarean, because that's more or less what they're trained for. They're trained more for performing surgery than they are for physiological birth. I mean, seriously, your OB-GYN in a normal vaginal birth is just showing up to catch the baby. Maybe. Sometimes the nurses are there to attend and catch the baby. But historically, really, that's how OB-GYNs are trained. But also you look back, and when you saw the beginning of medicalization of birth, forcing women to deliver on their backs, why was that decided when that seems very counterintuitive and productive, for example? And how did that impact, for example, initiating something called twilight sleep or twilight birth? Could you explain some of those things about the history of birth in the United States and the impact that has had on the way women birth today in a medical setting?
Yes. So birth on your back is the worst position you could be in for birth, physiologically. It doesn't allow your tailbone there's literally your tailbone flexes in women. Your pelvic bowl flexes the moment the head is descending through. When you block that, you get that cervical pain. Your coccyx, right? Sorry,
well, it's like your knees normally bend inward when you're in birth, and what you're doing, if you're having a normal physiological birth, right, to open up your pelvis, you're putting your knees in and your feet out. And then in a birth, when you're laying on your back, you're pushing everything down,
you're smashing everything down.
You're putting your knees out, so you're closing the pelvis.
So many things, and you're cutting off the the way for the baby by half being on your back. I mean, it makes it so much more painful for the mother, but also the baby like that. And then you bring in the forceps, and then you bring in the suction and crazy stuff like that, because hello, your pathway is like half as small as, or half as big as it can be when you're laying on your back. But that was simply all because that gave these male doctors, OB-GYNs, the view. They wanted to see what was going on. It makes no sense. It doesn't make sense with gravity. Gravity is your best friend in birth.
Yeah.
Just letting gravity do its thing. You don't need to push most of the time when you're using gravity. And on your back, you're taking all that away. You're making the pathway small. You're hurting your low back a lot. A lot of times women smash their tailbone and are having to sit on donuts and ice after birth. Like, that's not normal. I have never had that pain. I've never been on my back for birth. But anyway, that's really how it started. It had nothing to do. It was not centering the mother and baby, as I like to say. It was centering the viewpoint of the doctor, the ego of the doctor, if you want to say that, the ability to intervene, to mess around. It's really sad. But that came into America, and it really just took off, right? And now we have this hero savior complex. And of course, there are times in these rare situations, I feel like I don't have to keep saying this, but there are rare times where, yes, they can save the mother baby. But what's happening, and what happened right from the beginning, is they saw that they could get so many women in a constricted amount of time by surgically opening them, by just taking a vacuum to the baby's head, and all these horrible things, when sometimes they're not, unless they're necessary, which I'm talking about the ones that aren't necessary, to get women out of there faster, quicker, more births happening. This all coincided with the introduction of formula in the 1950s.
Yeah.
Babies were not even given a chance to get on the boob. They found later, and they were brought into those rooms that you see in movies back in the day where all the babies are in their beds. It's like, where's the mom? I just don't even understand that. And they ended up giving like formula to those babies without the mom's, without the mom's permission.
I think that still happens often.
Like Nestle, whole milk powder formula, and it ruins their microbiome and sets up breastfeeding on a really hard path. That might, all these things. You're not getting the oxytocin by having your skin to skin with your baby. It just rippled from there. And so we find ourselves in a state now where that is so normal. And almost all of us were born in a hospital. And even our grandmothers maybe, were babies, some of the first ones to really have all their babies in a hospital. Like, if I know both my grandmothers, they had a few babies at home, and then they started to have their babies in the hospital. One had 11 children, one had 6, and you saw that progression in their history as well. And here we are, where because we're looking around and we think, well, that's what my mom did and everything. It's not that it's bad, but what I'm passionate about is coming back and going, okay, but that's not necessarily what needs to happen. And let's talk about what actually protects the mother and baby, and what really, what kind of setting is required to have a vaginal birth, to allow you to open up and to give birth naturally. And it's really hard then, when women start to learn these things, to find that in a hospital setting, unless you have really good insurance in America, for example. Ireland's a whole different thing, because public health care. But in here, really good insurance, or a lot of money to have that like private room and water birth, but you're still in a hospital. You still had to rush to get there. It's still not your home. People are coming in. And those things affect you. You can't get away from that. Another topic that I'd love to talk about is that so many women just don't want the suffering of birth, the pain and the suffering.
How is a Catholic? You're a Catholic provider. So I know how I approach labor and how that's changed the more kids that I've had, and embracing that suffering. How do you like, how do you encourage your clients to embrace what would be called like those waves, for example? Like how do you help women and walk them through that process?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a wonderful question, because that's our number one concern usually, right? It's like, can I do this? Is it going to break me?
No, you can do it.
Oh, 100%.
You can do it.
And we are meant to
Mm-hmm.
receive from a Catholic viewpoint, which is it's the only place I can come from now. I wasn't always there. That's another question. But from a Catholic viewpoint, the suffering, first of all, it will never take you farther than you can go, and it allows you to see your vulnerability and the strength that God gives you as well. At the same time, you are opening, as like they say, open-handed prayer. If you live a life of prayer, it's like your hands are open, you're vulnerable, you're not clenched, you are open to receive, but at the same time you're showing your weakness by an open hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more weak than ready to fight, right? So that's kind of a metaphor, but it's also in birth, staying open to that and trusting that force coming through you no greater than what you can take, but also the concept of offering it up. This is me emptying myself. There's a Greek word for, and I hope I'm not saying this in a way that doesn't have reverence, but like, okay, there's a Greek word for Jesus' crucifixion. I think it's charisina. Anyway, it's the emptying of himself. He completely emptied himself by his death, right? Obviously, I'm not comparing birth to the crucifixion, but there is a reflection of that God is bringing human life to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And how does it happen? The mother empties herself completely of control, completely of selfish desire. Really? I mean, do we really like love contractions? No, you have to embrace that. And for me, my 3 births all at home, completely unmedicated, the last one just to my husband and I, the more I've embraced that fully, and I tell myself it's the power of love flowing through me. I'm going to offer up this intensity. I'm going to offer all of this up. I'm going to, and I believe most of your listeners will understand what offer it up means, but I'm going to allow this to move through me and open up and know that I am held completely. This is not just me. This is God, the Holy Trinity, me, and the soul of this baby. My husband is in there as well, and I am held. That allows us to receive the Holy Spirit in a way that is like, woo, in a way that it's hard to feel that in any other sacrament, marriage, all these sacraments definitely are getting the grace of the Holy Spirit, but this is an actual physical way you can feel it. And and it's an experience, it makes me cry, that I deeply want for mothers to begin with if they can. And it can be scary, but when you get through it and you realize I can do this, God's not trying to kill me or break me. This is this freeing, knowing, emptying myself, because that is the greatest love we can have for another. So a mother doing that is beginning to receive her child's love. And the love, when you allow, yes, you can get technical and be like, oh, the hormones are, making you feel that love. Well, yeah, but that's God's design, and when we don't interrupt it, we get the best, highest high of love through us, and it radiates for, it's always in you, but it radiates for a good, I would say 30 days after the birth. When you've had a natural birth, you're still kind of in this birth world, like for me, I'm very prayerful. I like whisper. I can barely talk loud. It's like you're just flooded with that love in a way that I think sadly is robbed from so many women. That doesn't mean you can't find it and go home and, you find it in your own way and heal from any trauma or anything like that. Of course, that's possible. Of course, always everything's possible with God. But if you can start this way at the home birth and choose that, I think it's just an incredible gift. I realize the gift just keeps giving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, I feel as if I struggled to bond with my older kids because I had epidurals with the first two. And then with my third, I was determined. I had very adverse reactions to those epidurals. It's like my body couldn't handle the anesthesia at all. It was too much for my body to handle. So I would, for hours, be stuck in my delivery room, and I feel like I bled more. I just had so many issues, and I struggled to bond with them. And so I was very determined when I had my third that I was going to have a natural hospital birth, if that's possible. And I remember laboring they actually let me labor in a pool, but then I had to get out to deliver laying on my back in a bed. And I remember being in transition about to give birth, and I was like, I don't want to move. It was so painful to go
Yes.
crawl into a bed across the room
Oh my
and
gosh,
get
that's so
on my back.
painful.
It was horrible. And I
Yeah.
remember being like, I hate this. This is awful. Because the pool had really relaxed me a lot. I went from like barely being dilated to being totally dilated in about an hour. And maybe that's something worth talking about, is like all of the cervical checks and stuff. They don't mean anything. And it's so frustrating when you have OB-GYNs who actually know that, and yet they continue to do these cervical checks and be invasive. And disturbing that natural process. I always told my OB after the first couple, I'd say, you know what? I go from 0 to hero, even if I'm not ready right now, if I'm not dilated right now at my 39-week appointment, I'll see you in a couple of days. And sure enough, in a couple of days, I show up at the hospital ready to have my baby because I knew my body. And this time around, I feel like, I sort of cast aside everything because the medical system had let me down on so many different levels, from birth to that postpartum period to my children struggling with oral ties and all kinds of sensory issues and that stuff being totally lost. And I had struggled so much to understand what was going on. And no matter where I looked, nobody had answers for me. And so it took a lot of research and going to integrative specialists and things like that to finally uncover the issues that were unresolved with my other children. And so when I got to my fifth kid, I was like, I'm undoing all of this. I'm not doing anything that I'm supposed to do. I'm rewriting the script. And it has been the best experience. I cannot overstate. That's why I've become so passionate about it, because with my
the
fifth,
difference.
it's such, I can say it firsthand. I've seen it. And yes, when you have different temperaments, that does play a role, but that nurture component, you cannot overstate that nurture component and how that changes the relationship that you have with your kids. And you know what? It's like my older children too see that I have this really special bond with our fifth child because we just did everything differently, and they too have a strong relationship with her. It's really interesting to watch, because like where my heart has been healing, it's emanating from me as the heart of our home, and our children are gravitating into that. And so like I have 5 kids and my oldest is 8, and I love motherhood right now. It is amazing. And I do think being able to have time to heal after my birth, to bond properly with my child and learn like what's normal, like not rushing through life, not feeling like I have to be constantly doing all the time. Which is an important part of motherhood and a part of birth, is like, it's not about doing, it's about being present so much of that process. And I would love for other women to experience that. And I'm not here to judge anybody who has gone the medical route. I did it, I did it. And I just wouldn't do it again if I didn't have to, so
it's just normalizing it, isn't it? That's what I say. Like, I have 3 older brothers, and 2 of them are married, and their wives always do hospital, and they have wonderful families and everything. And there's no judgment there, and
Yeah.
they might think I'm quite crunchy or whatever, but
Yeah.
everyone's on their own comfort levels, but they and other women be the first to say, I can see the drawbacks as well, like and the bonding and the milk coming in just like, for example, you having your epidural. The epidural literally, it almost makes us stone cold, where we have
I
no
couldn't
emotion.
even I couldn't even hold up my legs. I had to have a nurse and my husband holding my legs up because
Yeah,
I had nothing. I had no sensation. It was so disconnected. I remember I was throwing
it's so
up.
hard to bond when you're
Yes.
like, I am not in my body right now. I am
No. I
like you're
was.
dead, but you're awake. I mean, it's crazy. It's
It can
really,
be, yeah.
yeah,
I
it
know that's
can
not
be.
everyone's experience, but that was my
I
experience. It
know.
was not positive, you know? So, okay, one thing you talked about, and I'd love for you to touch a little bit more on this. You kind of said that you've had this journey back into the fullness of your Catholic faith, and it seems like maybe home birth has played a little bit of a role in that, or at least getting into the birth world. Would you mind talking about that just a little bit? Because there is
Yes,
from our conversation,
I
it
don't
sounds like
mind.
there's this like pagan element there, and I think we need to warn Catholics and anyone who's listening that there is sort of this weird new age syncretism that's happening in Christian birthing circles. And
Oh,
so
yes.
let's talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. Great question. So this is really the pinnacle of like why I have a newfound passion, it being in my Catholic faith and home birth, because it is something that is not really talked about in Christian Catholicism circles. It's so been taken over. Like, I don't taken over is the right word, but it's become the mainstream home circle are very quite new agey, pagan, goddess movement, all wrapped up in
The
that.
divine feminine. Can you explain that? I'm so sick of reading about the divine feminine.
Oh, it's a complete mockery because we only know the one true divine feminine, right? Um, Mother of God. And why was she chosen? Because of her humility, is what we've learned, right? For many reasons. But why was she chosen? Her humility. And it's so interesting because it's a tangent, but it's like goddess movement, divine feminine is anything but humble, anything but charitable. It's all selfish. It's all let's be loud and yeah. Anyway, yeah, divine
Mhm.
feminine. So that word, like so many others, have been a bit corrupted or taken over by the New Age movement. The New Age movement is nothing new. It's existed forever and ever, right? From the beginning of time. It's our greatest temptation to believe that, wait a second, I don't need to actually turn inward and look at my own sin. I I can experience God in all these worldly ways. It's taking religion and almost making this pseudo new religion where it's not what it's like, political, social, economic, earthly, and it's tangible, and therefore people can really get mixed up in it. And unfortunately, birth has gotten very much in that because I think women have found they have this natural birth, they're anti-system, again, I'm kind of like that, but like coming from a different angle. But it's like
Mhm.
in that they find themselves in this place of, well, man, the patriarch, took away my ability to take in my greatest power, which is like having this total radical home birth and becoming a goddess. I am this goddess. This is the language that's used all the time in these circles. And um it's interesting. So I got mixed up in that a little bit. Real quick, my background, I married my college sweet college boyfriend, very young, 22. And there were so many signs it was not right. He was not Catholic. Always had an eye for other women and things, but I pushed it and forced it, and it was very painful. We were married 4 years, and no children or anything, but total infidelity on his part and all of that. And here I am. So I am Catholic girl, was hoping that marriage would change this guy, and found myself divorced with a really amazing accounting career in a big city. Everyone thought I had this wonderful life, and everything crumbled for me. I went to see a priest at the church we got married in on my own shortly after the civil divorce, and wanted to seek out annulment. And at the time, it just wasn't the right priest relationship, but at the time, he was just made me feel overwhelmed by that. So that for me, that's a longer story that I won't go into, was a trigger of me stepping away and going, okay, maybe I don't need this institution. I have never lost my faith. I have always said Hail Marys every time I've been in a situation. It's just natural, even through all this process of kind of being lost. And I see it now as a gift that I went through it this way, but thank God for the mercy of God and my parents' prayers and purely grace, I am back with it, complete clarity. And I'm so grateful because I'm raising my kids this way. But anyway, I went through this journey. And so when I was home birthing my first baby, I was getting a little bit caught up in, like kind of like grandmother moon, and I am the divine feminine, and I am nature itself. What are other things that were said? Like, this is how God created us, but we are experiencing God through this. And I looked at it as truly a deeply spiritual experience, my home birth, and my first, and it was.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't seeing it through the Catholic lens. There wasn't humility there. There wasn't a lot of surrender there. There wasn't a lot of acknowledgement of the power of God. But thank God, I believe I was meant to go through all that. This I can see very clearly, which is so wonderful to look back and go, wow, you were working in my life so much then, even when my back was turned and I, was definitely thinking I knew better. So yeah, and then my second birth, I was still kind of in the space, but I definitely was starting to get a vibe of this really isn't working for me. I feel like all these women are, it sounds really judgmental, but a lot of these women in these new age birth kind of circles there's just a selfish nature, and it doesn't just stay in the birth. It was like, we're also going to, free bleed on the earth, and we're not going to shave our armpits, and we're going to, we don't even need a husband. Like, we just need to be in a communal, that's like extreme, but like you'd hear things like this. And again, whatever. But you realize, wait a second. To me, for me personally, I went, all these women are lost, and they're just going to, like, this is one pathway they think that they're getting their power, their strength from. But there's no acknowledgement that, like, you were on your knees in birth, and that is all God giving you your baby. Mm-hmm. And I feel like truly by having these natural births, the grace of God was coming through me in a way that brought me back completely. So to speed that up to my third baby, Merlin, he's just under 2 now. I had just started like going, I think everything going on in the world, actually, all the evils of the world that we're seeing every day, let's say abortion, all these things, right, are in a way the Antichrist. And Christ is the answer. And Catholicism is like the apostolic church and the original religion. So whoa. And I was on this major journey in my third pregnancy of going, I got this all wrong. I threw the baby out with the bathwater because I was so upset at the institution and my marriage crumbling. I was bitter. I had this major, beautiful Catholic wedding with my first, and now I can't. Here's my husband who was raised Catholic as well, but we're living in sin and we have children. And, since we've gotten annulment and we've received the sacrament of marriage, but it was just a lot. Okay. And so I'm processing all this. We met this wonderful priest in Ireland, traditional priest, incredible man, changed our life. And kind of just started meeting with him, having him over for dinner, hanging out, walking us through. He recommended books. We started going to Latin Mass in the city, and my heart, it makes me cry. My heart completely was just like changed. And then my Merlin, my third baby, was born on October 13th. And this kind of sounds woo-woo, but it's not in that way. But that is the day of Fatima, right? When the miracle happened in Fatima. And my dad, little did I know, I didn't know this. My parents were very devout. They sent a prayer card back to Fatima during my third pregnancy, specifically praying for healthy baby and delivery, because they knew I was doing this all on my own. They were very supportive, but they're a little bit like, okay.
Yeah, you're a little
anyway.
bit. Yeah, I feel like my family feels that way about me too. Like, Angela,
yeah, they're like,
we love you, but you're kind of
trust
weird.
you, but we have opinions anyway. But I love them. So they sent this card back, and then he was born October 13th, and I was due October 2nd. So it was,
wow.
It's just kind of wild, and I just feel since then it's just I've attended births in Ireland, and I always find myself, when I'm just witnessing women, I'm not hands-on, I'm just there witnessing them, I am always saying the rosary in my head. And there's been a lot of very powerful stories of feeling, Mary's presence and intervening when I'm at other births and in birth. And so thank God I am fully back in a new way. I feel like I was never really truly Catholic, to be honest. I wasn't properly catechized or anything. So I'm doing all that in the last few years, and it's been the most incredible thing for our family. My soul, my husband's soul. Yeah. But it's hard because you look at birth full circle and you're like, why is it so new agey? Why is this, natural birth, home birth, and all of this? And I think it's just because God made us, right, to love him. He designed us so we would not be fulfilled until we are in complete communion with him. So that no human being walking around, I believe, whether they're baptized or not, doesn't have that inside them, right? And so here's these mothers. I'm not saying these new age mothers are bad moms or anything. They're most beautiful women. They're still God's children, and they're walking around and they want to fulfill. They don't know what it is. And birth is a pathway to that fulfillment, to finding God and realizing the complete grace of the Holy Spirit and life coming through you. And woo, it's amazing. But when they're not having that right theological filter, I would say, it could be taken, like anything, easily flipped and become quite you're worshiping birth itself, or you're worshiping the placenta yourself and itself and things like that, and missing the whole point. Hello. Probably rambling.
Sure no. What strikes me so much about birth and labor is that, painful childbearing is the curse that is given to Eve and all of women after the fall, right? And so in so many ways, that suffering we experience is really us working out our salvation in fear and trembling.
Yes.
And when we rob ourselves of that suffering, we're robbing God of that opportunity to work in and through us, to humble us and to bring us into right order with him. And I think that's such a gift. It's like built in. And you know what? In that suffering, as you pointed to earlier, we bring life, and God, sorry, she's trying to eat a Lego. Not okay. In that suffering, we are drawn and made new, right? Like he makes all things new, and we can be made new in that process. And we are co-creating with God. And so that's why it's so powerful. And I think you're right. There's this tendency of women in this new age home birth, natural birth movement who want to pretend that they're misguided. They think that the birth is is of their own power,
Mm-hmm.
that it's their own, it's not just that it's a part of their nature, which it is, but it's like it is the essence of God, that is like they are trying to co-opt God. And that's not it. We're cooperating with his grace in that process. And instead of it being from within and coming out, it's God working in us. It is us just being a conduit of his grace, and drawing near to him.
The other aspect of that is a denial of the divine masculine in a true Catholic sense.
Right.
There's an energy there that's like, what? The men aren't needed, or women are more powerful, or there's not a actual reverence or understanding of the union of true masculine and feminine, and creating this life and the balance there, and the
Right.
and that's what's so wonderful when your kids, I believe, witness the home birth that like my kids have, like you said, that they almost viscerally get the effect of wow, but they're also seeing right in front of their eyes, whether they remember or not, they're going to remember on some level.
Yeah.
What the result is of true intimacy
Yes.
and marriage. And that's actually like
That's normal and healthy.
way better than talking about it.
Yes.
It's so healthy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what I remember, somebody coming to our house, and we were telling them about how we were going to have a home birth, and they said, "Are your kids going to be there?" And I said, "I don't know. We'll see, like if it works out or not." But they want to. And I remember somebody going, "Don't you think they'll be a little traumatized?" And I said, "No." And that
Be
was the thing.
traumatized by another way to the
Right,
hospital,
exactly.
but
It's like it
not
was
this
so
way.
fun
Yeah.
to watch home birth videos with my daughter to sort of prep her. She's the oldest, and so she could see like this is the natural end of intercourse. And not that she understands what intercourse is yet, but at least we're starting with the
Right.
end, and as it becomes age appropriate, you get to lead her to this place where she can have a better understanding of like, oh my goodness. So when she gets older and she's tempted to engage in things that maybe she's not supposed to, she has a better understanding of what the actual risk is. But also see birth and our sexuality as something really beautiful and life-giving.
Yes.
Because I think it's like the way sex is taught about today is like it's super sexually gratifying, but also pregnancy will kill you. It's like, wait, what? How is
Yeah.
it that the natural end of this very wonderful act, when it's
I know.
properly ordered, is like that deadly and dangerous all of a sudden? It's like
It's like the
it's
greatest,
unbelievable.
greatest gift. I don't know this woman, but I have to recommend this book. It's the first Catholic natural birth book. Do you know this book? So Susan Windley Daoust, The Gift of Birth, Discerning God's Presence During Childbirth. Ending, but I wanted to bring that up because I'm only about halfway through it. My mom just got it for me for my upcoming birth in December. And I am every page, woof, she connects it back to the theology of the body. John Paul II's speeches on the theology of the body, and what the true end of birth is to lead us to the heart of God, to bring the heart of
Yeah.
God within us. And it's just so, I couldn't say it better myself, to be honest, but that's really helped me as well, as going, yeah, the new age movement, they don't,
They're
just
missing
taking
the mark a
something,
little bit.
yeah, definitely missing the mark. And who knows though, like it took me on a journey that got me to where I am. So it's I just pray that there's a conversion there for a lot of those women, because they can feel God and birth, but
You can't, and that's the thing that's
there's a
amazing.
dismissal of God at the same time,
What's so amazing is that whether you are a Christian or not, God is present at birth. Like every woman
Oh
knows that
yeah.
birth is sacred. It is like the only thing where there can be no doubt that it is sacred. And that's another good book that I wanted to recommend too, is Made for This Birth by Mary Hazeltine. Have you read that?
No, write that down.
You should write
Made
that.
for
Yeah,
this
it's a
birth.
good book.
Okay.
She is Catholic as well. She has an Instagram account called Made for This made for this birth, I think. But her
Okay.
book is one that I read preparing for my birth this time. And it's just very, very practical and very Catholic.
Wonderful. See, yeah, there's not a lot out there, but there is something. So thank God for that, because yeah, you don't have to be a hippie to have a home birth.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
If you get anything out of the interview today, you don't have to be a hippie to have a home birth.
There you go.
Do you
Wow, we talked a long time. Is there anything else that you wanted to
Yeah. No, I just want to
chat?
give people an opportunity to see where they can follow you or find you. Yeah, where can people
Yeah.
find you?
I do have the Instagram love-hate relationship, but bloom like a mother _ bloom like a mother. And then my website's just bloomlikeamother.com. I do have a little online course I created for couples specifically preparing for their first home birth. And I like once in a while do a Zoom call with couples preparing for home birth and support women locally in Ireland through the pregnancy and birth as well. But first and foremost, I'm a home with my kids. We homeschooled and housewife and all those things. But like you with your podcast, it's something that I have on the side, and I love the connections it's made. So yeah, you can find me there, and I hope to put more and more content out that's through the Catholic lens, because that's where my heart is. But I'm still finding it this thing where I don't know how to put that on Instagram in a way that I want to have everybody at different areas of their life receive it, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's something I'm praying around, because I feel like I've been a bit quiet on there, because I'm just like, oh, there's just so much new age
I
stuff
get
that I
it.
just don't, I don't. Yeah. So anyway, but you'll follow me on this pregnancy anyway. I'm in with my fourth baby, due in
Yay.
December sometime. So yeah.
Oh, fun. Well, thank you for coming
Angeles.
on today. It was such a joy to talk to you about home birth. And I guess maybe you could send me the links and stuff to some of the books that you recommend. And yeah, we can go from
Yeah.
there. That would be wonderful.
Thank you. Maybe we can have another discussion too, because there's so many other things, right? Like circumcision and all the other stuff
Yes, I
after
wanted to
the
talk about
baby.
we'll have to have you back on to
Next
talk about
time.
circumcision. Okay. God
Okay.
bless
Thanks,
you.
Angela. God bless you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.